Hey everyone. In this episode of the Open Fields podcast, we have JR Perdew, a minor league pitching advisor for the Chicago White Sox. We talk about his early beginnings, growing up and playing ball in Western Maryland, his coaching mentors, and the players he's had the privilege to coach for and against. We really hope you enjoy this episode as much as we had recording it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content of the Open Fields podcast. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Open Fields podcast. I am, of course, your co-host, Ryan Fields, and we have Ethan Landis, as usual, with us. What's up, E?
What's going on, buddy?
Oh, not too much. We got a special guest for everybody today. We have JR Perdew. JR is a current public school teacher, and he is also a minor league pitching advisor for the Chicago White Sox. How you doing, JR?
Doing all right. I'm actually
awesome. Well, thanks.
Assistant director at Allegheny College, not a public school.
Oh, okay. Then I misunderstood your LinkedIn page then.
Yeah. Oh,
so,
yeah, that was from old. I haven't touched that in 20 years.
Then try not to show your age at all, right?
Yeah, good.
So. Well, anyway, as I said, you're minor league pitcher advisor for the Chicago White Sox, and with baseball season right around the corner, I figured it was appropriate to have you on and talk a little baseball, and you're from the area, so it's awesome to kind of get to talk to you and learn a little bit more about you and how you got your start in baseball. So if you're ready to go, guys, first question is, I did some research on you, and it says you're originally from Frostburg. Is that correct?
I was born in Frostburg and then kind of grew up more in Cumberland, went to Fort Hill. And then out of high school, I had a few Division II offers, one Division III school. And then I decided to go out to Allegheny College and played under Steve Bizarnik and was part of the first World Series team in 1984. And then I got a scholarship to George Mason University after that. And I got drafted as a junior. Didn't sign. It was not much money, and then I was entered in the draft as a junior. Didn't sign. My senior year, I didn't get drafted, and then I went to sign with the Cardinals and kind of injured my arm, and then that just came to an end. And then I joined the Marine Corps, and after the Marine Corps, I was going to get out and be a state trooper. And when I got out, when I was in there, I worked in the infantry, and then I also did anti-terrorism. So it was kind of a perfect fit to be a state trooper and the training and all that. And then I got out, and Coach Bizarnik asked me to help him 1 year. And during that time, my mom passed away, and her dream was that I finish my degree. So I decided to go back to school, finish the degrees. And while I did it, 37, 38 years later, I'm still coaching. So I coached 8 years out there with him, and we were fortunate. We went to 6 Junior College World Series in those 8 years. During that time, that's when I got kind of hooked up with Leo Mazzoni. And Leo ended up becoming my pitching mentor. And then one day Leo said, you know what, you need to do pro ball, man. You could do this. And so I looked around for 2 years and got a lot of interviews and a lot of no's. And one day I come home and did an interview on the phone, just kind of not even ready for it. Got a phone call from the White Sox, and I just walked in the door, and it was an informal interview, and it went well. They flew me down to Florida the next day, interviewed, got sent home, and they gave me the job. And 30 years later, I'm still doing it. So it's been really cool and a lot of fun.
That's awesome. They just recently named the baseball field after the former baseball coach. Is that correct?
Yes, they did. Steve Bizarnik Field, and guys that know him, and like, here's the thing about Coach Bizarnik I'd like to share. Say, if you just knew him as a person, I can honestly say he might be the kindest human being you'll ever meet in your life. He's just a nice person. That's how most people in town know him. The guys that knew him as a player, or as our coach, I meant to say, an incredible mentor of young people, man. I don't know where my life would be. Like, I had great parents. I had a gentleman named Paul Ackerman kind of mentored me when I was young. I tried to quit college, quit baseball when I was young. Paul made me stick with Coach Bizarnik and not give up. But Coach Bizarnik, I mean, if there's a more influential man helping younger baseball players, I'd have to see him, because this guy he helped all of us grow as men. And he got me started on my journey up. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, so I was going to ask,
So,
like, with the naming of the field with the coach, how much of an impact and inspiration was he, to your coaching career?
unbelievable. Like I said, my dream was to be a state cop. My grandfather was one. So when I got out of the Marine Corps, I was totally locked in on that. Mom passes away. The Maryland State Police Academy actually had a closing of the academy for a while because of budget cuts. The governor kind of put it on like a freeze. So while I was coaching with him, I mean, I already loved him as a player, as my head coach. But now I got coaching with him, and I even got to know him in a different perspective. And he was the best, man. I mean, he really is the best. Great influence on me and everything. Uh, the thing I learned the most about him, and this is going to sound simple, stupid, but he's really loyal to his players. Guess what? It works. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It sounds simple, stupid. Man, this guy was so loyal to us. We would run through a wall for him. And I think the one thing I took from him was that I don't, somebody asked me, like, I heard the other day that the life expectancy of a coach in professional baseball is like 2.8 years with an organization, somewhere around there. And I've lasted like 30 with the White Sox. And it's like, somebody asked me, how do you last that long? And I was like, I got lucky and right place, right time, got great mentors, great upbringing. But I also think the thing that he taught me was I was just loyal to my players. I was there to help them. It was a pure loyalty. It wasn't loyal so I could move up the ladder. It was literally just I cared about them. I tried to help them. And I think the players know, man. They see you selfish, and they know guys that are loyal. And I really believe more than X's and O's, I was just loyal to those guys. And I worked hard every day. And I learned that through him, because that's how he was. He was so loyal to his coaches and his players. And he always had our back. And I think that was my greatest learning lesson. I think the second one that I think a lot, I do this when I do coaching clinics. Coaches always want to overcoach. There is so much overcoaching and coaching today. And the one thing he did, he let us play. He coaches you when you need help. And he gets out of the way when he knows you got it. And I think that was one of his greatest strengths, his loyalty, and he knew when to get out of your way and let you play. Uh, he also created an incredible environment of work ethic. I mean, he outworked everybody there, so you couldn't help but follow his lead. You know what I mean? He was just
Yeah.
he led by example. So I mean, those things really impacted my coach career, and they all sound simple. You know, he was loyal. He let you play. He didn't get in your way, and he created an incredible culture of work ethic. And all we did was win. I mean, I won when I played there, won when I coached there. And I think I carried those learning lessons into professional baseball. And then Leo kind of helped me with the mentorship of professional baseball pitching. But it all started really, you go back to your Little League. I mean, every guy influenced me. Little League coaches, through my high school coach, all them guys had an influence. But when I got to him, I mean, he really, I don't even know where my life would be right now. I can honestly say that. He was that impactful.
Yeah, JR, I grew up in the area as well. I played baseball, and I have a lot of friends that actually went to AC, and they all said pretty much the same thing you're saying about Coach Bazarnik is that
Yeah.
he is there for his guys. He will coach you when you need to be coached,
Yeah.
and he is just a rock for that organization, or was a rock for that program there. And it's just so many guys that came through that program and have just said nothing but glowing things about Coach Bazarnik. And it for you to say that too,
Right.
it just brings back a lot of like memories from friends past that have
Yeah.
said, like, hey, Coach Bazarnik's the truth. So
Yeah, he really is. I know that Doug Little, the coach at Potomac State, and I've talked to Doug a lot, and I've gone out and helped Doug with clinics or work with some players once in a while. And Doug actually asked me that question when Doug Little was coaching at West Virginia University. I think he had about a 5-6 year stint over there. He recruited a lot of Coach Zornick's players to Allegheny. And he asked me one day, he goes, JR, I've never seen a coach that the players absolutely just are 100% so loyal to him. What does he do special? And I said, that's what I told Doug. I said, Doug, it's so genuine. His kindness is genuine. His loyalty to you, his work ethic, the way he did things. And he told me, he goes, I've never recruited players that were more loyal to one guy than this guy. He recruits guys from all over the place. And I think that really shows you right there that, it's sad that he's out of the game because of, his age and time. But my goodness, man, I hope that all the guys that played for him take their lessons and pass it on to their kids and players that they've coached, because I tell you what, he honestly is the best. And I can't say it any more plainly than that.
I also heard he throws the greatest BP of all time.
Yeah, he doesn't miss. He'll throw for 2 hours straight.
That's what I've heard.
I'll throw for 50 minutes, and I'm sweating, getting drinks of water, seeing if somebody will give me a break. This guy will throw for 2 straight hours and never miss. I mean, it's unbelievable. Matter of fact, if it was batting practice, you or Ryan, he would recruit you to throw BP, not because he needs a rest. He just doesn't like the players to get so used to him as a BP thrower. He wants other guys.
Okay.
But yeah, he's money. He always gonna, because I tell you, when you throw batting practice to major league hitters, you better throw them down the middle cookies. They want cookies. And if you can't throw a BP, you can get pushed out in professional baseball. I always said he could have been an unbelievable BP thrower. No doubt.
That's great. So JR, with your basically 4 decades worth of baseball coaching, and like you said, 30 years with just the White Sox, kind of in your opinion, how has the game changed? Whether it be from a player standpoint, whether it be from a coaching standpoint, how has the game changed to you over those 30 plus, 40 plus years that you've been in coaching? Not just necessarily electronically, but just the game itself.
Yeah, well, so the game, and I'll say it from the pitching standpoint, the game changes about every 5 years, because right when the hitters start catching up to the pitchers, the pitching staffs change their philosophy. Then guess what? The hitters change their philosophy. You'll see more hit and run. So when I first got in, everybody pitched inside. Everybody pounded the ball inside. Then all of a sudden, the Atlanta Braves were the premier team in all baseball with the pitching staff they had. They located down and away and lived there. Everybody started, it's a copycat business. Then everybody started doing that. Then it became more of the sinker guy. And not only, so going back to the Braves, it wasn't just the fastball down and away. It was also the great changeups that the Braves staffs had. Then all of a sudden it went to the sinker. Then you started seeing where analytics kind of took over. And now you're seeing guys pitch more up and down, trying to get more swings and misses. But I say this all the time. Baseball has changed in a lot of good ways, but in a lot of bad ways, in my opinion, too. On the positives, these dudes have the best training methods. They're stronger, they're bigger, they're faster. Their bat speed is incredible. They run better. They throw the ball harder. I'm not sure they're better baseball players, though. And that's just an opinion. I don't want to offend the modern day player, because the modern day player, they're good kids, man. They're good dudes. If you get around them and you get to know them, they're good guys. They work hard. They get after it. They want to compete. I think where the guys in the old days that and I know I'm probably prejudiced to the old days. I know I am, because I'm way too old school, but they have a knack of guys who could get the bunt down. Guys made the basic play. They were very good at fundamentals. Strikes were important, not velocity. Wasn't trying to always get a swing and miss. You were trying to get contact out sometimes. You play for a swing and miss when you need it. So on the good side, they're bigger, stronger, faster. But on the bad side, I think there's a lot of instincts that have been lost, a lot of savvy. I coached in Venezuela for a bunch of years down there, and I got to be around like some of the greatest players down there, like in the big leagues, like Ozzie Guillen being on our team before he became the manager. Maglia Ordonez. I mean, I saw the older school players down there in those days, and Alvaro Espinosa. I mean, these dudes were tricky, man. They could do stuff that would fool the other team. There was a lot of savvy. Guys knew how to bunt, when to bunt. You saw the ball put in play a lot more. Guys would shorten up, spread out, choke up, put the ball in play. In all fairness to the player nowadays, they're being paid for home runs, doubles, and RBIs. So I don't blame them for getting big, strong. It's not their fault. And then the ball's probably, I don't know this for a fact, but I've watched it. Balls are all of a sudden flying over the wall at record pace. I'm sure guys are bigger, stronger, faster, but you also start wondering how the ball's made, how tight it's wound. Ballparks have shrunk. The strike zone has shrunk. I mean, everything's geared for the hitter. So you wonder why they're swinging with launch angles and, trying to hit the ball out. I mean, you can't blame them. But I'm prejudiced to the old days because I like the hit and run. I like the bunt. I like the stolen base. I like how pitchers went deep into games. I can't stand, I heard last year the average was 4 1/3 in the big leagues. That drives me bananas. I can't stand that. I read a stat the other day. The last 7 years, there were 253 complete games. Bob Gibson had 254 in his career. I mean,
I think I saw something
ridiculous.
like that too. Yes.
Yeah, and I listen. I like the fact that guys went deeper in the game, and I don't know, man. There's a lot of great things to the game. I'm telling you, because fans, the normal fan that goes to the game, they want to see the ball fly over the wall. I mean, they really do. That's exciting. Guy hit a trip on the gap. But I'd rather go watch Pedro Martinez match up against Roger Clemens, and the game ended up 2-1. And somebody had to get a bunt down to win it or move the runner from second to third. That's the kind of baseball I grew up under. So it's hard for me to love what's going on because the pitching staffs I grew up under with Leo Mazzoni was Maddox, Glavine, Smoltz. These guys could change speeds. They went deep in games. Command was important. Movement was important. Change of speeds was important. Not every pitch was a swing and miss. That's where it's
so
really
would you
changed.
consider yourself more of a small ball coach then?
Well, yeah, but you also got to adapt to the times and who you have. I mean, it's kind of like Earl Weaver back in the day. Earl Weaver was about the 3-run homer, right? I mean, back in his era, and that was old. That was in the 70s. He was a 3-run homer guy. He had great starting pitcher. He had a shortstop that couldn't hit, Belanger, but he was a great fielder. But everybody around him could hit. Frank Robinson, Boog Powell, Brooks. I mean, all them dudes could hit. So I think you adapt to what you have, But, yeah, I just like the old school. And I'll say it from the pitching standpoint. I want my starting pitcher wanting to go 7, 8, and 9, not 3 1/3. I have a hard time watching baseball that way. It actually annoys me watching my pitcher telling me he's tired after 3 2/3. I really have a hard time with that one.
And just as an example for that, I mean, the NL Cy Young winner, Blake Snell, he averaged, I think, 6 innings a game. I mean, on that end of it, he had a lot of swing and miss, but he also had a lot of walks too. So, I mean,
right.
and that's...
innings is still at least solid. But I just, listen, like I said, I think there's so many advantages to analytics. I mean, it's taught us so many great things. But it's not all analytics. You got to blend the old with the new. But you can't be so hard-headed and old that you don't believe in the new. You know what I'm saying? So I believe that, yes, I am old school, but I opened up my brain. I learned all of the analytical numbers. I was very intimidated when it first came out. It's overwhelming, all the numbers that you learn, and it can be confusing. But at the end of the day, man, baseball is baseball. You got to throw strikes to win a game. Guess what? Hitters on you, you better change speeds. You got to move the ball around. It's just common sense. It's not, I don't need a computer to tell me that. You got to throw strikes to win the game. So if you're going to throw you're going to walk 4 or 5 guys in 5 innings, you're probably not going to be a dominant pitcher, in my opinion. And I just think if you look back at the greatest pitchers in history, they all threw strikes at a high clip. They all could change speeds, and they commanded their fastballs. They moved it around a little bit. So that's where I like the old. But there is a lot of positives to the new, but you got to blend them both, man. That's the best way I could explain it. You can't be closed-minded to either side.
So sticking with the pitching side of it, I mean, more recently we've seen a lot more, and more than ever, guys are blowing out their arms, and it's a lot of people say it's like, well, guys are throwing harder than ever now, but other people can say like, well, the pitch clock has an effect on it. What, in your estimation, is really like the biggest issue right now with dudes that are just blowing their elbows out left and right? I mean, there's guys in the majors right now.
I've honestly
Have
never
like
heard that
3
about the pitch.
Tommy Johns.
Right. Well, I've never heard that about the pitch clock, but that's interesting. You said that. I know that every pitching staff I ever coached, I wanted them to work fast, throw strikes. Work fast, throw strikes. So we wanted to work fast. I personally believe it's 2 things. These guys are max effort. It's like taking your Ferrari and put it in 6th gear right out of the gate and just put it to the floor, and that's all you're doing. You got to put it in 2nd gear and 3rd gear too, and that's where I think the Maddoxes, the Glavins, the Jamie Moyers back in those days, Kenny Rogers, they could pitch, they changed speeds, they moved the ball around. There were flamethrowers, but here's where the other side of it. I don't believe guys, and I think Leo Mazzoni is the greatest pitching coach to ever coach in the Major Leagues. I believe that. I also was under Don Cooper of the White Sox, who I owe a ton of respect for. Coop was like my second mentor. Both of these guys were tremendous, and both guys had great track records for this. But Leo, so I want to say this about Leo. Pitchers in this day and age, one, they do everything on just max effort. There is no touch and feel. Leo stressed touch and feel. They would throw pitchers back in his staffs. They threw more often with less exertion. Now you're seeing guys throw less often with more exertion. And I just believe that's why you're blowing them out. So back when Mazzoni's staff, this may not be exact numbers. I'm inventing this a little bit, but I remember when Leo told me this. In his 14-year run, their starters averaged like 140-some starts a year out of 162. In other words, they were never hurt. They made all their starts. They were proud of that. They went to the post. The other one was they had a 5-year run somewhere in that 14 years where they did not have a pitcher on the DL due to an arm injury. It might have been a rolled ankle or, a guy took a line drive off his kneecap, but it wasn't an arm injury. And they were really big on, it might have been 4.5 years, whatever it was. It was somewhere like they were in season 5 when somebody finally hurt their arm. They were big on touch and feel, throw the ball more often with less exertion, and you learn to sink it, cut it, spin it, slide it, pull the string on a changeup. You learned how to touch, feel the ball. Now it's just max effort. And then you have guys taking 3 days off. And we always use the analogy, if I gave you 7 miles, you got a week to run 7 miles. Would you do 1 a day? Or would you just take 6 days off, run 7 in 1 day, then take 6 more days off? I would bet your body is beat up more. But if you run 1 a day,
absolutely,
you're going to hit the numbers of a 162-game season. That's why I believe Mazzoni's, I don't think it'll ever be touched what they accomplished. 14 straight division titles, 14 straight ERA titles. They were never hurt. Yes, you can say Maddox and Glavin, he was lucky. He'll tell you he was lucky. He had Maddox, Glavin, and Smoltz. But he also had some other guys that if you look at this, there was 150. I read this one time. There were like 150 guys that pitched for Leo in like 14 years. And all of their ERAs were like a whole point lower under his tutelage than when they left or beforehand. And a lot of it is their program. They touch field the baseball. They throw the ball more often with less exertion. So to answer your question about the blow up of arm injuries, I think that these guys only know how to blow it and get after it, and they're good at it. Listen, when these guys are on games, they can dominate you with stuff.
Mhm.
The problem is they don't know how to back off. And I believe their arm injuries come from the fact that everything's max effort in the bullpen. Then they take 3 days off and go throw in a game. And it's just, to me, it's not the proper exercise. And I believe that you have to exercise your arm more often to keep it maintained. And I mean, listen, this guy did it for 14 years. His numbers, if we're buying into analytics and you buy into data, well, he's got the data. They were never hurt. It's not an accident. It's not luck. Like I said, if you take a line drive off your kneecap, okay, that's bad luck. But they never had arm injuries. And their guys always went to the post. And that was it, man. They showed up. They were good. And I really believe baseball should take a look back a little bit and say, hey, why were these guys never hurt? But for some reason, we've kind of moved on like they don't know what they were doing. That bothers me. We look back at the pitching staffs of the Atlanta Braves and we act like, they didn't know what they were doing. Really? 14 straight ERA titles, 14 straight divisions, never got hurt. They knew what they were doing. They had a great system. And I'm going to tell you something. I coached against their minor league system during that era. Let me tell you something. They were good too. Their guys were never hurt. They were good at every level I faced the Braves. They were good in Myrtle Beach to Richmond to Greenville, their double-A team. They were good in Rome. It was just a system. And I'll tell you, man, their scouts did a good job drafting, but they developed great pitching staffs. And, of course, they're still doing it. I mean, it's kind of, it's changed. But I really believe that the game goes in cycles. Like I said, when I first got there, our philosophy was pitch inside. Everybody was drilling dudes and everybody was pitching inside. Then all of a sudden it was down and away, changed speeds. Then the sinker became a huge pitch. Then you saw guys more riding it up. And I think you're starting to see, because hitters are adjusting to the high fastball, now you're starting to see more guys learn to go back down and change speeds again. I think it's coming back a little bit. I really do. Because you got to adapt. The hitters are making their adjustments. Well, guess what? The whole idea is you got to get them out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of where I wanted to ask you, and you kind of answered the question, I think, is as a coach or the pitching coach, do you feel like the physical ability of the players that you have coached or are coaching is better, or is it more their mental approach to their success, from your standpoint, from where they're at in the league? How do you feel, what do you think is more important?
Well, I mean, the thing is, they're all very talented physically. For the most part, they're almost all physically talented. Our scouts do a great job of going out there and finding the big, strong bodies, the great arms. I mean, that's what they look for. But also the scouts of any organization, they try to go down them rabbit holes too, because they got to find out about person's character, and that's hard to find out sometimes. You don't always get the truth from people. So the scouting to me is the most difficult job in baseball, because they really have a hard job finding the physical talent that goes with the mental. But to answer your question, I mean, obviously if you listen, and I'm a 5'8", 170-pound right-hander when I was playing. Okay. So I didn't have the physical tools. So right away, a scout can look at me and go, okay, he's probably got no chance. I mean, that's a common sense. You look at me and say, he doesn't have the body that's going to play in the big leagues. But so when you see the 6'6" left-hander throwing 97, obviously that plays. Now, does he have the mental capacity? Absolutely. That's your answer. The mental part then takes over, because all the guys that we bring in, the Braves bring in, the Yankees, whatever organization it is, you go and you find a bunch of dudes that are big, strong, and athletic, and you hope to goodness that you find the right mindsets. You know what I mean? You have to find guys with high character, and that's not easy to always find. Those guys separate themselves. I mean, I think that whenever the best pitchers in the history, you Nolan Ryans, the Tom Seavers, and the Steve Carltons, and then you look in this era of the Verlanders, and those kind of guys, they're all physically gifted, but they're all super gifted between the years, man. They have great poise, great work ethic. They handle adversity at all times. They're smart. They got great instincts. Then you look at the Greg Maddoxes, who may not have had the greatest physical abilities. To me, he's like a Tom Brady, Steph Curry, right? And you can compare that. They lack the physical ability. Tom Brady, to this day, I think, holds like the slowest 40 time in combine history, and he's got 7 Super Bowl rings. And Greg Maddox, I mean, we watched him pitch at 85 mile an hour in a league where everybody else is throwing 94, 95. And then you watch Steph Curry, who's small. I mean, we all heard it. He'd never do well in the NBA because he's too little. And they were all great. What made them great? Between their ears. They had great skill sets, obviously, but between their ears, they're special. They're even more special. I heard this the other day. John Stockton was talking about Michael Jordan. And we all know Michael had this, like, I heard that Michael had like David Thompson had like a 48-inch vertical back in the day. They said Michael's was close to his. Whether it was higher or lower, it's irrelevant. It was an incredible vertical. We knew he had that quick first step, had the long arms, right? The 6'6" frame, physically incredibly gifted. John Stockton said this about him. He said, dude, this guy was Larry Bird between the ears. He goes, but no one noticed it as much because he has such great physical ability. But he goes, when I played with him in the Olympics, I realized how smart he was. He goes, Michael Jordan was smarter than everybody else. And then he goes, then I had to go against him in the finals. And he goes, I realized how smart. Those are John Stockton's words, not mine. And I thought, wow. He said this guy was smarter, greater instincts. He handled adversity. His mental toughness was through the roof. So I think if you take all that away from Michael, would he have been the greatest basketball player, even though he might have had the great physical ability? I doubt it. So I think that answers the question on the baseball side. I mean, I was fortunate enough to coach Mark Burley. I don't know if you remember Mark Burley.
Oh, absolutely.
And I tell people this all the time. Mark Burley was a 38th round draft and follow. 6'2", 170, 180 pounds, 6'1", whatever he was. He threw 85 to 90 mile an hour coming out of college, junior college draft pick. And I had him his first year. And I remember when they sent him to me, nobody called with special orders because he wasn't a number 1 draft pick. He wasn't a phenom. But right away, like, you started seeing this guy commands. He could change speeds. He could move the ball around. He could make the ball cut, sink, spin. He had great feel, tremendous fielder, best pickoff move in baseball. He had poise through the roof. I saw him get beat up in Cedar Rapids one night, gave up like 9 runs in 2 innings. And the very next game, he had to turn around and pitch against the same lineup, right? He dominated them with like 15 punch-outs. Like, who does that? Like, usually when you get beat, right? You know what I mean, right? You get beat up by somebody, usually you pitch scared the next game, or at least too timid. He didn't even, like, he pitched against them like they were horrible. They had just beaten him up 5 days ago. That showed me, he was 19 when that happened. And I remember thinking, wow, man, that's some pretty special poise. Like, he didn't even phase him. He had that kind of knack. I saw him take a line drive off his kneecap. He refused to come out of the game, finished the game, pitched all 7. It was a second game of a doubleheader. I mean, he was just tough as nails, man. So I saw him go through many slumps. It didn't bother him. But let me tell you something. He threw 87 mile an hour the majority of his career. He's got the 19th perfect game in Major League history. He threw a Major League no-hitter. Him and Greg Maddox are the only 2 pitchers to win 15 games 10 years in a row and 10 games 15 years in a row. That's pretty good for 2 guys that didn't throw very hard.
And he's probably got one of the best curveballs I think I've ever seen in the game. And his that play that he made, the ground ball off the first base line where he threw it back to get the guy out, it's probably one of the best plays I've ever seen in my life.
But, you know, here's another thing about him. Like when we would take pitchers BP, he could hit. We would take pitchers BP, and most of the pitchers are swinging and missing, popping up. He would actually stand there and go line drives into the gaps. And listen, the guy was a good athlete. He was a good athlete. He was undersized, a little bit, you know, he just wasn't powerful. But I say this all the time. Like I was in Chicago recently, and he's got a little statue outside the stadium, like a plaque. And then I was getting on the elevator. Guess whose picture is across the elevator? Mark Burley. And it's just like, man, that's really cool from a kid that he, you know, helped win the 2005 World Series. But he didn't have anything that was physically elite. Nothing. But he was mentally elite, I'm telling you. And you know, the other thing about him, he was the type of guy that towards the end of his career, he wouldn't even throw a bullpen because he was getting old and his shoulder was beat up. He wouldn't even pick up a ball for 4 days and then go out and dominate. Like, that's unbelievable to do that. Most guys take 4 days off. They can't find the strike zone. He was not only finding a strike zone, but he was putting it where he wants. He had certain abilities that other people didn't have. And you know, the scouts that found him, man, tip your hat, because they didn't find a physical specimen, but they found one of the greatest pitchers in White Sox history because of what was between his ears. And, yeah, he was one of my favorites to ever watch. I mean, he was fun to be around. Good guy, too. Just a good dude. Funny. But if he walked in a room, you would never know he was a major league pitcher. He was so normal. Like, he talked about hunting and fishing, and he was just a regular guy, man. And I just think that he was that type of person on the mound too. Like, he didn't bring anything special except all he did was win. That was special. And I think one of the things that he did do that I forgot to mention, he was a super ultra fast worker. So you talk about the shot clock that we got, the pitch clock, wouldn't have needed that thing because he was ultra quick at working. And it just, I think he also got in hitters' heads because, I mean, as soon as he got in the box, buddy, he was coming. He didn't play around. The other thing that was cool, this is how focused he was as a pitcher. We were in a big league meeting one day, and we were discussing how to work certain hitters. And they asked him, they said, Burley, how would you work? I'm making this up. How would you work Edgar Martinez? He had no idea. He turned around to Sandy Alomar Jr., our catcher. He goes, say, Sandy, how would we work this guy? And Sandy goes, hey, well, with Burley, with your stuff, I might go cutter here, change up away, backdoor curveball, cutter on the hands. And, like, what that made me realize was Burley didn't think when he was throwing. He worked fast and just hit the glove. He followed the catcher's game plan. Whatever the catcher and pitching coach put together a game plan, he didn't even think about it. He was just, okay, curveball away, bang. And he would just execute, work fast, execute. And I also believe that was part of his greatness because he worked ultra fast and he just executed pitches. One of the coolest stories was when he first got to us in the minor leagues, I was grading him out. And this was before internet and cell phones and all that junk. But we used to have to fax in our reports to Chicago. Then the reports would go to all of our coordinators. So by the next morning, they would read the reports. Well, on my pitching report, I got a kid 19 years old out of junior college, and I graded him major league average with pitches and command. And our pitching coordinator, who was a longtime pitch coach, Don Cooper, in the big leagues, Coop had Burley for like a long time in the big leagues. Coop called me and goes, JR, he goes, look, bud, you're putting 50 across the board. 50 is major league average. He goes, look, buddy, I'm not trying to burst your bubble. I'm sure the kid's good. He goes, but is he really major league average? He's a 19-year-old JUCO kid. I go, Coop, in my eyes, he is. He doesn't miss. He throws everything to the glove, doesn't miss it. He goes, well, just keep that in mind as you're watching him. I said, okay, Coop. So a month later, Coop comes into town, watches Burley pitch. I hand him my report, and I wrote 50s again, major league average. Coop goes, those grades are too low. So all of a sudden he realized that this guy was better than we thought. That's what I'm saying. Like no one dreamt in a million years that he would be that good, but he was really good. And a lot of it was like what Ryan asked. It definitely wasn't a physicality thing. He was below average, I think, in physical stature and physical stuff, but he was way above average with his mental, and had great feel, man, for the game, everything. So one of my favorite guys I coached, I can tell you that.
That was actually going to be one of my questions for you, is like, some of the favorite guys you've ever been around, because you've been around the game for a long time, and you've seen tons of guys come through, but that's one thing that was really notorious about Burley, is just his pace that he put on hitters, because he got the ball and he was on the mound. You know what I mean? He's sitting there, he gets the ball back, and he's just staring at you, and that's kind of like,
well, him and
he like it puts you on
like
the back foot. You know what I mean? It's just like you're trying to like get in the box and go about your work, and you stare up, and he's just sitting there staring at you, and it's really off-putting in the box, and it just really makes you uneasy. And going along with the lines of like guys that have like not been like the most physically like gifted, that's what makes dudes like Tim Lincecum that had that run for a while so impressive, because he was not physically imposing at all, but the ball exploded out of his hands, and he just had unbelievable stuff there for about 8 years. And he's one of my favorite pitchers of all time.
You have to, if you're going to be a physically less stature guy, you have to have something special. You have to have elite mentality. You have to have an elite pitch, whether it's a changeup, a cutter, a split. You got to have something that's elite. You got to have elite command, or you have to have a funky delivery to where you're kind of messing guys up. Lincecum had the Bugs Bunny changeup. His changeup was elite, but he also had a little funky delivery where he leaned way back, but he did have a great arm too for a little guy. But again, I didn't know him, but I'm sure guys that coached him would tell you he was probably ultra competitive, a winner, did not accept losing. I mean, there's no doubt. He won like 2 Cy Youngs, I think. You have to have something that's special. But the one thing I was going to say about Burley and Mark Mulder back in the old Oakland A's days, during the Billy Bean, what do you call that? The Moneyball days, right?
Yeah, Moneyball.
Yeah, Moneyball. Mark Mulder and Mark Burley matched up twice in under 2 hours. Like, that's ridiculous. I mean, they had a game that was like an hour and 50 minutes. Both guys worked ultra fast contact outs, and the game was over. I mean, Greg Maddux threw a complete game on 79 pitches once. That is ridiculous. You got guys now in third inning on 79 pitches, and that's not an exaggeration. I've seen guys in the 70s in the third inning.
That's what I was getting ready to say. You're looking at guys pitching 79 pitches in the third, maybe even the fourth inning. So it's definitely changed, I think, a little bit.
And I'm not ripping up the guys of now, because like I said, I still coach these guys. They're no different than the guys of the old days. I hear a lot of older time guys put down the newer guys, and that bothers me, because I'm both. I was in the old school, but I'm still hanging on by thread. And the new guys, they're not bad dudes. They work hard. They show up and compete. They really have good attitudes. It's just different. It's a different style of game. It's not that they're better or worse, but I do like the blend. I just think you have to blend the old with the new and the new with the old. You can't put one over another. And there's so many great players in this era. But I do believe they could learn from the old timers. I do. I would tell any guy, my boyhood idol was Louis Tion, 1975 World Series, Boston Red Sox. I got to work with Louis my first year coaching. I got to work with another idol I had, was Manny Trio, second baseman from the Phillies in the World Series. Manny Trio, I got to coach like 10 years with Manny. I was a big fan of Joaquin Andujar back with the Cardinals in the day. I got to work with Joaquin for a while. Roger McDowell. You get to work with all these guys, and you could pick all their brains, and they'll all teach you something really cool if you just open up your ears and listen. And Same thing with players, man. Like going back to like what you were telling me, like got fortunate to coach Chris Sale and Addison Reed, Mark Burley. I had Carlos Zambrano in Venezuela.
I bet you that was fun.
You remember Carlos?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh no,
yes.
he was a competitor. Now he had one heck of a temper. Don't cross him because he was. But I loved Carlos. He competed. He wanted to win every night. He was fiery. That's just who he was. He brought that to the table. But then, I being lucky, but like all the pitchers, like I'm trying to think of some of the best big league guys, but coaching these guys throughout the years. But then I've also been fortunate enough to compete against Miguel Cabrera in the minor leagues and Venezuela, Paul Goldschmidt, Albert Pujols. Try to get those guys out on a daily basis. Yeah. I mean, it gets tough, man. Giancarlo Stanton. And you see them grow as players when they're young. So it's not only our guys growing, but we're going against them. I remember seeing Adam Wainwright when he was 18, 19 years old in the minor leagues. Dude, this guy was so advanced at 19. He was so good. Zach Greinke. I saw Zach Greinke in the minor leagues. He was a stud. These guys were studs. Wainwright was tough. Kershaw. Saw Kershaw in Double-A. But when I go back, some of my greatest memories are not also the best big leaguers, but it's also the dudes that never made it. I'm telling you, man, there's a lot of guys in the minor leagues who were warriors, who competed. They might have had an arm injury or they might have been this much short on talent that did make it. One of my favorite pitchers ever was a kid named Josh Fields. He grew up in Hungry Horse, Montana. He was a Lakota Sioux Indian. And, dude, this guy had a heart this big. He was a little closer with a cutter, kind of a Mariano Rivera type guy, except a lot less ability and talent. But I'm going to tell you something. Probably one of my favorite pitchers I've ever coached. Never played a day in the big leagues. This guy had the heart of a lion, competitor, great pitcher. Never got to the big leagues. I mean, there were so many of them guys, too. It's not just the dudes that made it to the big leagues. There's so many of them guys. And that's the thing that I'll cherish, like, in my career, because there's just so many great coaches, great players. And, everybody wants to talk to you about the famous big leaguers that you coached but there's so many guys that didn't make it that were just absolute warriors. I mean, guys that had incredible work ethic, that just competed on a daily basis. And that was the one thing about the minor leagues, man. It's a grind. You're on the bus every day and bad locker rooms. It's changed because now the stadiums are a lot nicer than they were years ago. I mean, we were in Savannah, Georgia. We had dirt floor as a locker room. Clinton, Iowa, man. There was a dog food factory down the road. Okay. Awesome. And in the summertime, smelling that stuff, dude, it was nasty. It was hard to play the game. You go in the locker room, you couldn't stand up because you'd hit your head on the ceiling. The locker room was just mold. I mean, how none of us, like, it was just black mold everywhere. Looking back at all that and laughing about, like, the locker rooms we had, now everything's, like, carpeted and beautiful and painted, and it just is so much nicer. But that's what you went through in the minor leagues back in the day, man. And, it was just kind of a grind. I mean, you had to be mentally tough to fight through it. And that's what all those guys did. That's why I admire all of them, not just the guys that made it.
Yeah,
even the dudes that didn't.
You really show how much you love the game when you can go through those types of conditions and those types of fields and locker rooms and stuff, and really push through it. And JR, something I wanted to ask that you kind of got started about was, if you remember, we had talked a couple of weeks ago at where I work. There's not much time left for you in the game. You even mentioned about you're kind of holding on by a thread. How much time left really is there for JR Perdew as a pitching coach? And really, like, what would be your favorite moment in your coaching career that might not have been, say, your minor league championship or your World Series championship?
So right now it's kind of year to year. I'm hoping to go maybe 2 more after this one. So a total of 3. If I could do that, that would be a blessing, and then probably just move on. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of 1 year, but I'd love to get another World Series ring. And we had a nice thing going. The year we won it in 05, everything was special. We had a nice build up to it. Our minor league started over in like 2001. We started building, boom, we win it. I thought we were on the pace to do it again. We had 2 straight division titles. Then the third year, we had a lot of injuries, and I don't know, man. It was a lot of injuries and things went wrong. And I thought it was more injuries. Then last year, everything just kind of imploded. And listen, man, it's there's no one to point the finger at. It's all of us. We just couldn't get it done for various reasons. And I don't know. But now we're kind of at not a slight rebuild again. And hopefully we'll get that back quick. So I'm hoping, because we have enough talent left still to win it quickly, I think. And the bottom line is all you got to do is get in. Once you're in, you get hot at the right time, you can win it. So I think if we can get in, I would love to get one more World Series ring and then right off to the sunset. That'd be the perfect scenario. Win the World Series, and I'm calling them. I'll say, guys, thank you. But, man, my greatest moment, I'd like to say 2 things. One, the blessing of being with the Chicago White Sox. What was that?
I know. I saw that too. I did that the other day. I put my thumbs up, and it gave me a thumbs up bubble or something. I was like, "What was that?"
Wow, that was pretty cool. I thought there was people behind me partying.
It's a celebration, JR.
Yeah. Two things I'd like to mention. One, the blessing of being with the White Sox. I owe them everything. Great owner, great general managers that I've been under, like 3 or 4 of them. Farm directors, pitching coordinators, the players. Man, I have nothing but respect and love for the Chicago White Sox. Greatest people ever, man. And that goes all the way down to the kid hanging your clothes up in your locker, to the guy that's washing your clothes, to the field crew, to the people in the high offices, man. First class people. They've been awesome. I have nothing but respect and love. That's my greatest memory. Other than the Marine Corps uniform, that was probably my next uniform to put on. It's a great honor to wear that uniform, and it really has been. The number 2 thing that I think is special are the bonds that you will take forever. And I said this to someone the other day. I've coached kids from like 20-some different countries, and there's no other business that there's a bigger melting pot than baseball. I mean, I'm sitting in a clubhouse with a Dominican, a Puerto Rican, a Venezuelan, a Mexican, a Colombian, a Brazilian. I'm probably missing somebody, a Cuban, a Nicaraguan. And then all of a sudden you got a kid from South Korea, Taiwan. You got a kid from Japan. And then you got Northerners, Southerners, city kids, country kids. And I tell you what, man, we're not like football and basketball. We don't have locker rooms. We have clubhouses. There's a difference. When the Patriots go into Pittsburgh to play, they fly in on Friday night, get their hotel room, do a walkthrough on the field on Saturday, go to the locker room, dress for the game, play the game, undress in the locker room, get on the plane and fly home. We're in a clubhouse for 5 days. And baseball practice, and we all know how drawn out baseball can get. I mean, we're in the clubhouse at 11 o'clock in the morning for a 7 o'clock game, and we don't leave till midnight. We live together. We eat together. We watch TV together. We're on the bus together, the plane together. You stick that many people that are from such diverse backgrounds together, I'm telling you, it's been one of the greatest learning lessons of my life to be around people from so many different walks of life. And I'm telling you this, we all become brothers. It's really cool. I wish real America got to experience it, because I didn't experience it on a small scale with a teammate that might be from somewhere else, or, maybe a different this or a different that. But when you get into pro baseball, man, there are so many guys from so many different places, and you realize how different cultures are and how people are brought up and all that. But my greatest bonds are with guys that couldn't speak English. And you come together as brothers, and you love and respect each other. And that bond is a lifetime, man. It's the White Sox and the bond with the players are the 2 greatest gifts that I was given coaching. And I can honestly say that more than any championship, And now I say that, I don't mean that over my children. I meant as a career. As a career, you know where I'm going. I mean, obviously,
Absolutely,
the
yes.
greatest gift for my 3 kids.
I mean, yeah.
But I meant as a career, I owe the Chicago White Sox. My kids were born under the Chicago White Sox. I got married. I traveled the world under them. I had all my surgeries when I broke my leg. I've been so blessed to have the greatest owner. Everybody, man. I know that sounds cliche, but they're the best. I love the Chicago White Sox. I owe them everything. And then on the other side of it, the players. Man, the players and the camaraderie for the coaches, too. It was the best. You stick a bunch of guys from very different cultures together, and somehow we come together and become brothers, and we find a way to coexist. And it's really cool. Really cool.
Well, I think I can definitely speak for Ethan. I can, when I say, thank you, JR, for very much for taking time out of your evening to really sit down, talk with us, and just, BS for a few minutes about baseball, especially, like I said, coming around the corner.
And yeah, I mean, it's starting quick.
Absolutely. Well, I only had one other question, so and I'll tell a real quick story too. But E, if you had anything left to ask JR, feel free, because like I said, I only had one more.
No, I mean, I can't count how many questions I have right now, but we are on a time
yeah,
limit. I get it. So,
I mean, I could sit here for days,
Yeah. This is, if I could just sit here and ask you tons of things, but I'm just sitting here going to church basically. I love listening to someone talk ball, and someone that's been in the game for so long. It's one of my most favorite things to talk about is baseball, and just I can go. Me and Fields every single day we go back and forth talking about baseball. It's just. I'd love to have you back and have more conversations, or if I'm back in town and you're meeting up with my uncle or something like that, we can just chat up again. So this has been so fun for me. This is so fun.
Same. I've had a lot of fun too. Thank you, JR.
Sure.
Yeah, the one story I had about, and of course, my stepbrother's a big White Sox fan. My friend Chris Benato is a big White Sox fan too. The one funny story that I actually do have is I don't know if you remember this or not, but back in I believe it was 1997, I believe John Kruk played for the Chicago White Sox and played his very last Major League Baseball game, ironically against the Baltimore Orioles. I was actually at that game, and I was very young at the time. But, I did get a chance to see John Kruk play, who is, of course, a local kid here from Kaiser, grew up in the area, played at Allegheny College as well, got drafted by the Padres, played for the Phillies, so on and so forth. I actually got a chance to see him play in his last game. He got his base hit, finally got on. He was like, I watched an interview with him. He had done a podcast and said that he'd win a couple of games. He went 0 for 4, 0 for 3, and he was like, you know what, I'm going to one more hit and I'm done. And it just so happened to be in Baltimore, and he finally gets it and he walks off, and everybody's questioning, like, what happened to John? And I watched that podcast a little bit further, and he had mentioned, like, he got the base hit, he walked into the clubhouse, he got dressed, and he left, and he was back at home in Kaiser by the time the end of the game was going on. And he's like, everybody's still questioning where he's at. And it's like, I always thought that was really cool. So I was going to say, like, did you ever get a chance to, interact with John, being a local guy as well? And the only other thing is I had we do a Mount Rushmore of at the very end of every episode. So like I said, speak on John if you can. If not, what are your 4 favorite places that you have ever coached in your career?
Okay. Well, first off, yes, I know John very well, and that's honestly the way he should have went out, and that's typical John right there, to just get off the field, go get dressed, and drive to Kaiser. That's perfect Tim. Yeah, great guy, and I tell you, he's a career 300 hitter in the big leagues in 10 years, man. That guy he could play. He was, I mean, how many guys finish hitting 300 in their career?
300 on the dot, if I'm not mistaken.
What's that?
I think it was 300 on the dot.
Yeah. I mean, he was a pure hitter, that's for sure. Wow, the 4 best places to play or coach at, I guess, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like the 4 most stadium, wherever it may be.
Well, I mean, when we were in the World Series in Chicago, I got to go to the World Series in 2005 and was there. That was probably one of my favorites. Oh boy, I'll say number 2, coaching in Venezuela. My memories of Venezuela, man, it was their professional league in the winter, and every game is Game 7 of the World Series, and that's not an exaggeration. The emotions down there are unbelievable. You win, you won the World Series that night. You lose, it's like you're at a funeral. It's unbelievable, and that was pretty cool. Man, I don't know about the other two. I don't know. I loved my time in Birmingham. I had a great 5-year run in Birmingham. Loved it there. And then I'll say Winston-Salem because that was my long time. I coached in Burlington. I coached in Bristol. Coached in Birmingham, as I said, Kannapolis, North Carolina. But I'll say Winston-Salem because I spent about, I think, probably 12 years there and a lot of great times in Winston-Salem. So those would be my 4 favorite places: Chicago, Venezuela, Birmingham, and Winston-Salem.
Awesome. Well, I'll have to look more into the Winston-Salem and into Venezuela ball too. Like I said, we had a chance to talk a little bit a couple of weeks ago at my job and didn't get too much into it. But yeah, I'm going to definitely look into that.
Yeah.
JR, I want to thank you so much for your time this evening. Like Ethan said, I could sit here and talk baseball with you for days upon days, but definitely look forward to, you're welcome back anytime you have the time. So you got anything else? Because I'm out.
No, that's it. Like I said, we can go on for hours and hours here,
Yep.
but both of us got to get up in the morning at some point, or all 3 of us do at some point. So, again, thank you so much, JR, and hopefully meet up with you soon. So,
Yep, sounds good. Thanks again, guys. Thanks for having me.
No
Appreciate
problem.
it.
Thanks everybody, for taking the time out of your day and evening and listening or watching wherever you may be. Look forward to the next episode. Thanks again to JR Perdew, and we'll see everybody soon.